that working?
Yeah, I think we're live. Put on a mask to give yourself a fun look.
Let's see.
I'll check on Anarchy Ball too.
Alright, yes, we're getting loaded. We're going to be doing a post-debate discussion.
Yeah.
So,
and general discussion.
We're going to get things going in just a second. I'm going to set up a couple more things.
Yes, and I need to share to Philosopher. Hey guys! We're just going to get set up here. Just give us a moment.
Yeah, just 1 minute here.
Yeah, okay, it's live. So I'll share this.
Alright, we're almost there. And there we go. It's just this.
Okay. And I'm gonna look at some of the comments on the debate, so I think it'd be good to respond to a lot of them. Some generalities. I noticed that. Oh yeah, the lighting is kind of funny. But I noticed that. How's Liberty going? Well, I think it's spreading. But I noticed that there were so many like spams of angry emojis and haha emojis whenever Larken talked. And I'll be honest, I like spammed the likes whenever Larken said something good.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts? Your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts was that, the whole debate really just revolved around the initial assumption of, who owns the property if it's owned at all. And then
government
right,
property, yeah.
The government claimed property specifically. Mm-hmm. And then, who is the proximate owner? And I think in a lot of ways, I think Chase kind of tied those things together, almost making it seem like as if it was, a push for the argument of ownership is to say, well, they're also proximate, and so therefore they deserve this. It's, making it more about merit than, even principles. Just like, this is what they're owed restitution, and, therefore they need to have this land. They need to have this government-developed land. And so for me, that was where the debate really was centered around, and that fundamental assumption.
Yeah, that premise, Chase's premise for his argument that there should be closed borders because the taxpayers plus anyone who has been aggressed against by the state has a higher claim to government claimed land. And that was the premise driving his whole argument. And he wasn't advocating for privatizing everything as being libertarian. I don't know which admin it was, tried to say and pin the comment in the debate. That was not what Chase was saying. Chase was not calling for selling each of the government claimed property to individuals. He was not talking about that. He was trying to say that somehow taxpayers and anyone who has been aggressed against or violated by state agents are somehow collectively own government claimed property. So that is exactly what he said throughout the whole debate. So I don't know how I'm putting words in his mouth when that's exactly what he was claiming. He said that collectively people who pay taxes and pay more taxes. Okay, you're too drunk for this, all right. But I think this is the guy who's saying like "Fubby how."
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh okay. So, like I said, that'd be a good pho restaurant. Fubby how, come to Fubby how. Hello, Jefferson in Brazil.
Right. So, I mean, for me, the big problem that I saw, and I didn't feel like this, although it was kind of hard to hear because I was like listening to 3 monitors at once.
It kept lagging for me.
Yeah, it was lagging at different points, but it was on our end. But to me, the biggest problem was this continual assumption that individuals, especially who are living near the roads that have been developed, that they somehow have this higher priority. This idea that, they pay taxes, it's proximate to maybe where they live, and so they deserve restitution for their taxes. And since the property, is close to them, it makes sense that they would have, maybe the most proximate land ownership claim, if we're going to say that's the way to have restitution. But for me, my problem, with that is that the whole concept is rooted in the idea of them being forced to pay money. And fundamentally, when you're saying restitution, of course, is the idea of trying to make someone whole. But if you have the ability to make someone whole by giving them back what it is that was taken, or something very close to that, then that's the closest kind of restitution. Of course, there's some things, and for me, this is a very close, near and dear issue to my heart, because I'm very much into criminal justice theory, because I have my doctorate in law and specifically study criminal justice theory, especially juvenile justice. And practice that.
But wait, Chase has more legal knowledge than you.
No, he didn't say that. He said he just said he had.
He said the Larken.
No, he just said the Larken. I don't know, but that's not the point. The point is, for me, is that this is something that's near and dear to my heart, because I think a lot about this. It's always present on my mind. How do you make somebody whole? And you think about that with rape cases. You can't unrape a person. I know there's a lot of memes about that and stuff like but you can't ever undo those things where there's a physical act and you just can't change it. You can't undo that instance. But unlike rape or something like that, taxation is the taking of paper money. And as much as someone doesn't like it and be like, oh, well, I subjectively value that more, then you can give somebody back paper money. That's what it is. You can give somebody back that which is taken. You can actually have restitution with the thing that was taken, about as close as possible. And it'd be the same thing as if someone had a car stolen, right? If you had a car, you had a yellow Dodge Charger or something like that, and it gets taken by the government. Maybe the government doesn't have that specific car that was yours, but they get another Dodge Charger and it's pretty close to what you had. If you were given back that car, you'd be like, oh, that's restitution for that what was taken. It's not obviously the exact same thing, but it's about as close as you can get. Maybe the car they took was destroyed. The same thing would happen with paper money. Now, of course, some people are like, well, it wasn't so much the paper money, but it's the value that it connotes. And if, government's being dismantled, well, then it's suddenly not as valuable. Well, the thing is that, of course, it's not going to be subjectively as greatly valued if you're in the midst of dismantling government. But if you wanted to say, okay, how do we have a closer perfection of restitution, you can give people back the money in, of course, proportion to what it was taken. And then you can have a government going at a business sale or divesting all of their assets and things like that based on the dollar. And then the government can just light it on fire when they're done. It's understandable that the paper money is not what's valuable. It's that it's a communication tool. That's what money is. Money is communication of I value what you have, and it's a future transaction of I'm going to do things potentially in the future for transacting on that medium. Money in and of itself conceptually, as far as how it ends up getting used. So, to me, that is a closer means to restitution than just saying, well, you live next door to, Wallaby Way, and therefore you are a joint owner with, the other 300,000 residents of this city. It's one of those things where if you're going to be accurate and you're going to really be nitty-gritty about the terms that you use with restitution and law, then you got to go all the way and can't pretend like, you're only halfway going to restitution when you actually can give back people the thing that was taken. Paper money. It's nothing else that was taken. Unless the government did take someone's land like eminent domain, well, now you actually have a real specific example of land being taken. Okay, now that makes sense.
Yeah. So. Daniel Scott said in the chat, he's like, if I take your money and then I use it to buy a car, do you now own that car, or basically should I just give you back the money that I stole?
Right, and that's a great question. That's another criminal, justice theory thing where you think about, okay, what's the best next step that someone can do in the event that, whatever it is they don't have anymore. And it's possible someone could suggest that as an opportunity, but again, that's an assumption, right? We're assuming that the government took the money and that taxation money was then used to pave a road. But if we look at what actually has happened with government, it's $20 trillion in debt. So we got to think really carefully about where that money went if the government's that deep in debt. And if you look at the numbers, all the personal income taxation has been absorbed by national debt. That was found in the Grace Commission to Reagan. And much of the money that the government relies on in terms of, what it's using day-to-day operations is coming from corporations, it's coming from tourists, it's coming from toll roads and this or that. Yep. It's coming from a wide variety mixture of things. Yeah. And in reality, the government doesn't even really have that. It's in debt. To the Federal Reserve, it's in debt to foreign governments, it's in debt to all kinds of people around the world, and including departmentally. But realistically, the people who are owed money are not really in the United States right now. They're all over the world. And just beyond that, even if you're going to say, oh well, it's the government's oppression that is causing this harm that needs to be fixed. Okay, well, how do you account for all the people outside of the U.S. with whom the tax dollars were used to go and oppress them outside the United States? Where is the restitution for the family whose road or home was destroyed by a drone bomb? Where are all the people getting restitution for all the coups that the government's done across the world? Where are the people getting restitution for all the different types of policies of foreign interventionism and death and destruction? I would just imagine that someone whose house got blown up might have it a little bit worse than someone who had, a 20% tax rate. Just a thought. Maybe that person might have been oppressed a little more and might, be a little more deserving of some kind of restitution if there's anything left after you consider, the whole of the debt that the United States government is in. Yeah. So to me, if you're going to be that rational and you're going to be that nitty-gritty about the details of restitution, the details of the financials, you can't just go down a really thick layer of rich legal thought and then stop there without actually considering the numbers underlying that. You can't just stop here and say, well, it's a little difficult to figure out, but whatever. You'll have some share in the profit. Whoa. It's like we can actually think pretty carefully about the government's, books and pretty carefully about who has been harmed by the government, physically, especially in the last 60 plus years. We've had quite a few disclosures about what the government's, done overseas. It's not really that hidden anymore. So,
I think this is related to something that you've proposed. And for those of you who don't know, this is Jack V. Lloyd, who wrote the comic series or produced the comic series Voluntaryist. So that's who he is. Someone asked who this was.
I'm nobody.
No,
I'm just homeless. I was.
I took him to my phone restaurant. But I think this segues nicely what you're talking about, dividing up government claimed land to the people who the government actually took the land from. I think this segues nicely into your article that you wrote of the, quote, not-for-profit government model, which is basically the first step is making funding of the government selective and voluntary. Selective as in you get to choose what services you want and what exactly you're paying for, just like any other business or service. And then something else that you mentioned was, what do you do about government claimed land? Land that the government has stolen, or land that the government has not transformed in any way, but just says, this is ours, you have to pay us if you want to live there and give us property taxes. So I think this is a good segue to talk about, I think it'd be good to hear what your idea of how to break up that land is and how to make it so it's actually private property. Therefore, this whole closed borders debate is moot, because if it's all privately owned, then it's up to the individual owners what they do and who they let in. So.
Well, right, and what you're saying right there, I think with Chase and Larken, they were both on that same path, I think, of saying, hey, the federal government needs to start getting rid of its lands and putting it back into private hands. This idea of having these wide amounts of federal territory that's just not even used, it's just preserved land, is just ridiculous. Obviously, the U.S. government is using money, taxpayer money, to maintain these lands, keep people off these lands, for whatever purposes, the government will eventually do with them. Of course, some people probably people who like the Agenda 21 stuff know that there are plans to try to get people into cities and move them. Yeah, Agenda 21 is this UN resolution. A lot of people, talk about this stuff, but the idea is that government wants to get people as collected as possible. They don't want people spread out because it's easier to control and manage people when they're in cities, to have that infrastructure for spying on people and things like that, and having just like, and all this stuff has already happened in the UK. The UK is always 10 years ahead of the US when it comes to their spying and stuff like that. As far as, interventions. But basically, the government is really just holding all this land out. And we have, this, everybody's like, oh, what about, homeless people and people who are poor and this or that. And meanwhile, the government has all this land that's just sitting there not being used. And then when people try to help out homeless people, like in California, and they, build them tiny homes, the government comes and destroys them. You know what I mean? So when private people try to help out people who are hurting and dying and starving, feeding the homeless, building them homes, you name it, whatever it is, the government comes in and stops them. A church, tries to let homeless people sleep on the property, the city will fine them $12,000. Someone tries to collect rainwater, the government will throw them in jail. So every single instance of the government, or people trying to be free, trying to help people, the government steps in, stops them. And so that's how come, as I think, Chase and Lark would agree, the government needs to let go of that property and allow people to actually have land and freedom and security.
Right. I think so. There's probably more, but the main things I see with current government claimed land is there's land that's just completely unused, They haven't transformed it in any way. There are no roads. Think of like this empty land in Arizona or Utah or whatever. And there's land that's unused in every single state. So for that land, the government needs to not have property taxes, needs to not force people to get permission from them just to homestead it. They don't legitimately own it per Lockean norms, that they hold citizens to. So in terms of government claimed land that is unused, that should be free for anyone to decide to homestead. And that's how it should be. And then in terms of government claimed land that is like roads or public infrastructure, I think that that's something that would be opened up to voluntary funding. So if the government was voluntarily funded and selectively funded, people could choose I actually want to help pay for the roads. Or more efficiently, they could just drive on the road and pay the tolls, as already exists. People
right. I know. It's people are like, oh my gosh, you might have to pay for something. It's let me get this straight. So you have, in order to drive on the roads and not have your car towed, you have to pay an annual registration tax. You have to pay a vehicle registration tax. You have to, if you want to use toll roads, and now, my God, most states, if you actually want to get from point A to point B anywhere, any major city, you're paying tolls in order to get there and not wait for 5 hours. Look at the traffic jams in LA or whatever. So it's just these ideas that it's so weird or strange to pay for something just doesn't even make any sense when you consider the fact the government already does this. It's not like it doesn't already happen. The government already does these things. So
exactly, yeah, and it's people are like, why should I stop every mile to pay for the roads and stop at a toll booth? But it's do any of these people have toll roads or ever been to a toll roads in a state? For those, like in Washington State, you're automatically scanned. You're sent a bill, or you can get a scanner, and you're automatically scanned. You're still going 60 miles an hour or 70, like I do. And there's also different models. And, my response to those people who say, I have to stop, I don't want to stop in an anarchist society and, give $1 every time I want to go 100 meters, I'd ask them, how would you, if you were, if you owned a piece of road, what would be the most efficient way you would charge people, especially considering the technology that exists today? Would you make it so hard for customers? Good luck having customers come to your road. It'd be so congested, they go somewhere else. So
well, and also it's just ridiculous because when you take a look at most business models anyway as it stands, most businesses use other methods to bring in income for people that are coming to them, whatever it is. Advertisement, if you think about that on the sides of the roads, or different types of ways that they can reach you. Maybe, there's a box or a radio station or something that you listen to and it plays different ads or sponsorships, whatever it is. Like, there's always ways for people to make it efficient and make it low to no cost for the average user. It's just not that weird. But even then, I mean, I have a different take than a lot of people do. I have a take that I think the government should move toward a not-for-profit model first, and I see the opening of the market outmoding what currently is. I mean, for me, I see it as, you know, by the time anyone could privatize the roads or do something with the roads, you know, the technology for flight and air travel and aerospace travel will have made the roads obsolete. You know what I mean? It's like when we think about government, we think about government technology. By the time you actually materially free the market, the things that you think, oh, government does this, or we need to, you know, have these things with government, there's going to be technologies that just replace it. I mean, it's just really not that weird. I mean, at least from a historical perspective, as to technologies doing that when, you know, the market's freed, or from what already is. When you look at, you know, the crazy technologies that are happening, especially with drones, with the ability to have, you know, quadricopters and stuff. Yeah,
government distorts it by, you know, with their, you know, secret hush-hush taking of technologies under the presumption that it's a threat to national security or some bullshit. You know, government distorts the market. There are technologies that the government has that the public doesn't know, that's kept secret. So, yeah, who knows where we would be, you know, road-wise or transportation-wise if the government hadn't, you know, had all these subsidies for the automotive industry, or prevented other technologies for flight from occurring. So, but of course, in the meantime, before that technology happens, because the state is gay and slows everything down, there are private solutions for maintaining the roads. And you're going to talk about the not-for-profit model, I think. Like you said, you had a different... I want you to.
You want me to? Okay, if you really want me to. I was trying not to, because I'm trying to focus on the debate with Larken and them. But I mean, just really quick. It's fine. Just really quick. You know, the not-for-profit government model is just this concept of a transition. Because I mean, for a lot of people, they wonder, what is a meaningful, reasonable transition model? How do we get from here to having a stateless society, or a, you know, close to stateless society? And from what I've seen, it just happens naturally if there isn't the coercive element. And so turning government into a not-for-profit styled entity where there's no more taxation, everything is funded voluntarily. They can't have any more secrets. There's none of this, you know, hiding what they do behind closed doors. Will lead to then market mechanisms being able to pick up what government, you know, has been doing wrong and to learn from that and to do it right. And so it doesn't dismantle all the structures and the things that are there. It's not like, oh, the roads evaporate. You know, people like making those jokes, like, you know, the roads just slowly disappearing and vanish. But no, it's still, you know, all those things still exist. It's not weird. I mean, nobody would be very happy if the next day all of a sudden there was crazy chaos because all the rules about everything has changed. Rather, it's how do you allow the market to outmode government? And you can't have the market outmoding government if the government prevents any sector from being allowed to experiment and do that. And that's the real core, is that it's not so much that we have to worry about getting rid of the roads or something like that, you know. It's about how do we allow the free market and be freed enough in order to outmode what the government is doing. Right. So, you know, that's really what that boils down to.
Right. I just think it's important because, you know, when we talk about closed versus open borders, we're not talking about private property, folks. We're not saying, hey, individuals, you need to leave your borders open. It's if you own private property, that's up to your discretion who you let in. We're talking about government claimed land, you know, and I think it's important to talk about a transition because once you know, government doesn't claim any land, once it's all been privatized, or if they just, you know, let unused land remain unused and not charge people to live on it, I think this whole borders debate is moot. This is only a debate that happens because of the state as it is and what it illegitimately claims as its property. So I just think it's important, and basically what I understand of the not-for-profit is that you're basically opening up the government to the free market. You're opening up each of the services to the free market. Just like any other business, it's voluntary. And they don't have a monopoly on that specific industry or service, because people can compete against it, like the USPS. I would love to have, for fuck's sake, like be able to compete against the USPS or something, like Lysander Spooner tried to, but then was fined for. So, but anyway, let's go back to the debate.
Yes, let's get back to the little deviation. But I think now, like as far as the debate goes, let's talk on some topics that I think weren't necessarily covered in the debate, but obviously in any memes or anything you do here, it always comes up, and that's, oh my gosh, what's going to happen if you have open borders? Is it just going to be immediately, like a million people show up, and it's like a video game, and they're just like attacking in hordes? It's sort of like, I think like all these people are envisioning. It's just like immediately, all of a sudden, there's like boats coming on. It's like you like roll up the window, you're like, oh, okay.
I have gotten some of those arguments, so it's not
right, right. Yeah. Now, of course, there needs to be some very clear things defined, just to take it out and just really cut to the chase of people for concerns. Is there such a thing as radical Islam and dangerous ideologies where people want to kill themselves while killing others? Absolutely, of course. This is we're not denying that. Is there extreme destabilization in the Middle East? Absolutely. Is there, major radicalization in the Middle East? Absolutely. Are there people who want to come in, sneak in, kill people, blah, blah, blah? Of course, it's not being denied, and by any means.
Exactly.
The issue is what was done to lead to that situation, and what can be done to fix those things without initiating more government violence. That's the real key. Because, I think most people probably here get the idea that a lot of the destabilization, by and large, has been the U.S. government and the people along with them. I mean, it's pretty clear at this point, if you haven't read up on the CIA's released documents and stuff like that, as far as Iran goes and thereafter, and selling arms to the Mujahideen, Charlie Wilson's war, double funding both sides of wars, even Trump selling arms, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. I mean, nothing's changed. This is not a surprise. This is not weird. The U.S. government's engaged in the same stuff, and anyone who lived through 9/11 knows exactly what happened there, as far as displacing, a million plus Iraqis and 600,000 plus casualties for, a population that supposedly wasn't a part of the people who hijacked because they came from Saudi Arabia by their flame-proof passports. So, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous, but it's pretty open at this point. Most people know, what's up. So, we see that in context. We see that there's a problem, but just because the U.S. government, did those things doesn't mean that, okay, that's not a problem that needs to be resolved. Yes, obviously it's a problem that needs to be resolved. But the issue underlying that is, of course, the government sponsoring and paying for people to come over, by and large. When we're talking about, Germany and there's other places in Europe where it's a much more serious issue because there is, somewhat of a means to walk over, literally, not figuratively, we're seeing that these governments are supporting it with their welfare states. They are encouraging, incentivizing, and supporting all of these people to come over and paying for it and moving people out of their homes and violating their property rights to have them come in. And that's absolutely insane. Problem. Right, that's absolutely insane. If somebody wants to freely help or this, that, okay, fine. But this is happening by and large because of government policy, and it is an intentional government plan to destabilize. Now, of course, some people are saying, okay, well, here comes, the one world order, new world order stuff. That's the whole point. Destabilize the Middle East, bring over the Middle Easterners, create a whole conflict. But let's put it in context again. Because, first and foremost, the real leftists, the real statists are already in those countries. Maybe when you're talking about, oh my gosh, these people are so crazy, it's like, let's think carefully here. What are the countries that have all those socialist healthcare programs? What are the countries that have all those people who are the SJWs, Sweden, who are the people who have traded logic and reason evidence for sophistry, who have allowed their governments to literally strip them of every single ounce of human dignity they have? They have no guns, they have no means to protect themselves, they have no sovereignty in their property whatsoever. So when we're talking about who's the real problem, if you want to point, it's those people coming over from the Middle East, it's like, you have a problem in your own country to begin with. You weren't some amazing, Western bastion of liberty.
And free markets.
Right. These countries, by and large, are major statist countries with serious restrictions on free speech. I mean, literally, in Germany, they have crazy restrictions on free speech where you can be put in jail for, just like in Saudi Arabia. You know what I mean? And in Sweden and things like this.
And weapon
it's not
restrictions.
like these places are deserving of some kind of libertarian welfare border control to save the leftists from their own self-destruction.
Right.
Literally,
Exactly.
the whole policy is the leftist states being given a type of welfareism. That's exactly what closed border policy is. It's taxes being taken from people to protect the border from the government's own destabilization, and they're paying for them to come over, and they're getting the fullness of the policies that they voted for all this time, that they supported for the past 50 years. They're getting their cake, and they're about to eat it. That's it.
Right.
They're getting it. They deserve everything they're getting from the crisis. Every last bit. And you know what? Those libertarians who are left, they should be going and saying, screw this, I'm out of here, I'm going to go find more people to join up with who actually love liberty. I'm leading these leftists, going to get run over.
Screw
them.
California.
You know what I mean?
Like,
Screw them.
Get out of
Guess
California.
what? All those horrible places are going to collapse. You think you're going to save yourself in California or New York? You think you're going to save yourself, in Germany and all these other countries that are literally like bastions of leftism and absolute horrible policies as to individual rights? Forget about it. Stop trying to save what's dead. You're literally injecting medicine to a dying person. That's it. They're dead. Stop trying to save them with more welfareism, which is taxation being used to create more policies to give the governments more power to control the people who actually live there. That's all it's used for. It's just used to control the people who already live there. In America, it happens with 100-mile border checkpoints. Regular, red, white, and blue Americans are pulled over at border checkpoints, searched, put in jail, molested by TSA, molested by their own government under the policies that are supposed to be used to keep out people who are not citizens. So stop believing the lies. The fact of the matter is that it's not about open borders. It's about a government that supports welfareism and a government that has no respect for individual sovereignty. Exactly. That's it. Yep. That's all it is. And they're going to get everything they deserve for being a bunch of leftist, progressivist statists. And you know what? The people in America, the people who are living in the states here who actually respect individual liberties, they're coalescing. The people in America who are actually about liberty are working together. They're creating free state projects. They're looking at seasteading institutes. They're looking at Liberland. They're looking at different states where liberty is more valued and trying to push up, further there. They're trying to push for nullification and secession and everything else. The fact of the matter is that the only actual principled solution is to have the government not do anything and to continue not do anything and to continue not doing anything whatsoever with taxation or any type of welfareism or whatever it is. There's just nothing they should be doing.
I really like what you're saying about how the states like California, or basically the politicians there that voted for welfare in the first place, how closed borders is a sort of insurance for their terrible policies of welfare. Right.
They already have terrible policies, and the people there who already live there are already major leftist progressivist statists.
A lot of them, yeah.
Well, if we're looking at statistically, by and large, the voting bloc is that big, and they all want those policies. It's going to collapse on itself no matter what. Guess what? It's going to collapse on itself. This is not a mystery. Illinois is not able to fund anything. They're going bankrupt. California is on its way there too.
What about New York City?
Oh, I mean, New York is having troubles too. I mean, all the pension crises and everything else, all those crazy leftist statist states are gonna implode. That's too bad.
Well, I mean, I don't know if, necessarily when it would implode, but for sure having closed borders would delay it, because if you close the borders, you have less people on the welfare state, even more incentive for them to continue the welfare state, and you still have the problem of needing to end the welfare state, immigrants or not. So when it comes to this debate, like, what's not being talked about in the mainstream is that they're only talking about closed or open borders. That's all they're talking about. They're not talking about why we have a welfare state. That's not in the mainstream media debates. And so you have the people, the citizens of like Germany, for example, or Sweden, arguing over closed or open borders, over land that they do not legitimately own. Meanwhile, what's being ignored in the mainstream media, and this is really sad and tragic, is the fact that what has created this huge refugee crisis is, one, the various governments' intervention in the Middle East, displacing people and creating war-torn regions. Secondly, having a welfare state and subsidizing immigration of people who may not have otherwise come over. And thirdly, as Jack pointed out, government displacement of people and violating their property rights. In Germany, people getting kicked out of their homes that they've lived in, that they voluntarily acquired, that they paid for with their private money. The government just kicking them off of their property and giving up to migrants and refugees. Or the UN using billions of taxpayer money to create a refugee camp that isn't even at full capacity. So that's not being talked about in the mainstream media, and that's just what's absolutely tragic about it. That's why when we talk about it, when you talk about open or closed borders, when I do, for example, when I talk about open borders, I always mention the welfare state. I always mention how we need to end the welfare state. Sooner or later, you're gonna need to end it. And in terms of who is gonna vote for more welfare, it's not the immigrants that is the problem. It's actually the native-born leftist population that are in high positions of political power, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, the Democratic National Committee, that are in high positions of political power with control over the mainstream media. That is the real threat. That is the threat that we need to address. Not, oh my God, people from third world countries are going to come over and they're going to vote for more welfare. It's like, you know what? Even if you kept all of those people out, and not all of them would vote for welfare, by the way, but even if you kept every single immigrant out, you still have people in the native population who were born here, whose families have been here for generations, who are going to vote for socialism and Marxism. Marxism is spreading, and it's been spreading in the universities. It's been spreading in public schools through indoctrination, because most commonly professors are communists because they don't know how to provide value in the market. You have that problem at home. So when that's what I'm trying to do with this whole open versus closed borders debate. It's trying to refocus the libertarians advocating for closed borders, like Chase Rachel's, for example, to refocus on advocating the end of the welfare state and reducing all government violations of property rights. That is what we need to do. That is what we would need to do, even if we close the borders even more than they're already closed. That's what we have to do. So, anyway, yeah.
No, it's exactly true. I mean, it's hilarious to think that, oh, you're so worried about somebody else making the already entrenched welfare system worse, when it's the people who are here who created it, sustain it, and continue to grow it. So it's, it's imploding on itself as it is. It's one of those things where it's like ignoring the cancer that's already inside you and worrying,
right,
another
exactly.
Snickers bar is going to feed the cancer.
Right. Someone asks on this topic, they say, okay, but why advocate for open borders when there's a welfare state? Why?
Because it's the principal position. It's not like I say, oh, open borders, ignore the welfare. It's welfare state, get rid of open borders. Get rid of closed borders. There you go. Get rid of any type of government intervention in people's lives that is violating their bodies and going after things that are, victimless. I mean, It's not just like all or nothing thinking. It is everything, every single thing, all at once. But I won't ever, sit there and say, hey, initiate more violence by funding border enforcement with taxes and then telling them to go and molest people all around the United States, including citizens, with that stolen tax money. That's increasing violence to increase border control. I mean, borders aren't some magical thing where you put a bunch of Lego bricks up and it's like, oh, look at that, nobody can climb it. It involves patrolling the entirety of the United States, airspace, you name it. You have to look underground. I mean, it's not just this simplistic thing. It's an ongoing $12 billion a year, at least, and probably more, coming up, funded project plus whatever else they want to do with it, and the erosion of civil liberties in the process, just like everything was after 9/11 with the Department of Homeland Security in 2003 and the TSA. The TSA is also checking to see if people are here or, going about legally. It's not like they're just, oh, okay, here's your driver's license. Like, they're checking passports. Yeah. Airports are how people come in from other countries, too. It's not like, oh, it's just a wall.
Right, and another reason I don't advocate for, an advancement of harms, adding another violation of property rights. I just lost my thought.
Yeah, because that's the person said, but wax the wall and make it slippery and put up a webcam.
Oh my god.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, sorry. I forgot what I was going to say. But, oh yeah, I remember. I said it already. But one of the reasons I don't advocate for increasing violations of property rights, as in state-restricted immigration and state interference in travel, is because ending the welfare state is something that needs to be done regardless of immigration. And I would argue that immigration is only really a devastating problem because of the state's violations of property rights, like having gun and weapon restriction laws, and also having a welfare state, which is, another form of private property violation. So that's one of the main reasons why I don't say, hey, even though we have because we have a welfare state right now, that means I'm going to justify aggression against you. I don't do that because I know that this debate about ending the welfare state needs to happen now and also later, even if borders were closed, again, even more than they were. So it's why delay the inevitable? Why waste your breath advocating for more violence against people? Second reason is because you're just going to turn off those who are on edge. Look at all the, centrists who are looking around on the internet, looking at different, arguments for different things, looking at the libertarian argument. By advocating for aggression against peaceful people, you're going to turn those people off. And, what grows the liberty movement is principles. Ron Paul, who is, he's a minarchist, but he's pretty damn close to voluntarist. He himself has said taxation is theft. He stayed to principles no matter what. And look how many people joined the liberty movement and were exposed to the liberty movement and became very interested in it because of how strongly he advocated for principles. And Ron Paul actually said in a, sorry, I was reading something, but Ron Paul actually said when he, in a pork fest, the recent pork fest in New Hampshire, he said, don't dilute the message, stick to principles, because principles are paramount to spreading liberty. If you want to build a free society, you have to build it on principles. You're not going to, you really expect, hey, let's give the state more power and justify them violating people's properties, having unwarranted searches and seizures, just like the fucking TSA does at the airports. Let's do that. And then once they do that, then we're going to focus on the welfare state and also ask them to, hey, please stop. I know we justified it before, but now that the welfare state's gone, can you please stop searching me and seizing my shit? What the fuck? You want to give them the ring of power and expect them to give it to you back? And by the way, they already have the ring of power, folks. It's time to fucking get rid of the ring of power. Stop giving them more. So that's why, sorry, I hope I answered your question. I think I did. But that's why I don't fucking advocate for closed borders. This is why I advocate for open borders when there's even though there's a welfare state. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those funny things where people put up the hypothetical, so you're for, closed borders until the welfare state's gone. It's as if me saying, open borders, closed borders, magically undoes that.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with anything? It's just you're advocating for a position, a principled position. Here are the principles and the ethics of liberty, of libertarianism, of voluntarism. There's no deviation. There's no pragmatism to it.
Right.
Here's what they are, and you can accept it or you can reject it, but they're consistent. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no in between. I want them all to be done at once. It's not like, oh, okay, I just want a little bit of liberty here and there. That'd be nice. Mm-hmm. We're advocating for everything all the time, all at once. It's not just, one thing or the other. Yeah. So the issue is not saying, about you're saying, okay, we're not going to advocate for some liberty positions. No, it's advocating for all of it all the time and not advocating for things that increase government violence or increase government powers.
Yeah. And someone has power ring. I'm talking about government. Government is a monopoly on coercion, is a monopoly on force. That is the ring of power. Someone made a really good meme. I think it was on Anarchy Ball, actually, where someone was like, no, if I take the ring of power, like basically they're quoting Lord of the Rings, if I take the ring of power, I'll use it for good. And someone else was like, no, you need to destroy the ring of power because the ring of power will corrupt. Anyway, so that's the analogy. So.
I'm gonna hit up a couple comments really quick because these are they're fun and they're easy. So one of the comments is about the TSA. I actually did my doctoral thesis on the TSA, so I love talking about that. The TSA is actually still bad. In fact, on 9/11 there were 2,600 some odd people who died, and the amount of hours lost annually because of TSA procedures equals the average lifespan of the amount of people who died on 9/11 each year. So in other words, the amount of hours that are cost, in TSA procedures for people is the amount of the lifetimes of people lost on 9/11. Those are those little freakonomics things that people don't really think about. But when government takes your liberty a little bit at a time, people don't think about it, about how much that actually adds up to. But that's what it adds up to, among a host of other big problems.
Well, isn't there another problem with the TSA is the radiation in the scanners you go through? Right,
the millimeter back wave, and that's actually why it was removed out of many European countries between 2008 and 2012 because several European countries found the increase in radiation would eventually to people having increased cancer rates, so they used other forms of technology, thermal and stuff like that. Right. Yes, there are tons of serious problems, not just you don't like being touched in your groin, but actual physical health things that can happen because of TSA practice and procedures. Right. And I also think it's really gross when you have to take off your shoes and walk your feet, across that. Someone actually did a culture dish of that. It's pretty freaking nasty what you walk through with your shoes off, where everybody else walks.
Right. But the efficiency is a big problem with the TSA. I think it was the United Airlines at an airport that actually invested their own private capital into improving and making it more efficient. So that's another example of government being inefficient. And someone said, well, the private security might check your bags too or whatever. But not necessarily. Before the TSA, not all airports had these checkpoints and scanners. They actually just had private security around monitoring things, and then if shit hit the fan with an individual, then they do something. But they didn't have these long checkpoints at every airport. So anyway, they would do it their own way, basically.
Right. There's security and stuff like that. If you look at Israel's security, they do different things too. But it's the idea there, though, is that it's mandatory, it's government enforced, it's an imposition on private security for airports, and it's an imposition on people's private lives. De facto. And of course, the hypocrisy is that they don't have it at private airports anyway. It's just, there's certain levels of stupidity that it takes that if you don't actually research what the government's doing, you think, oh, this is great, whatever. And so it's I like being touched. It's okay, fine, go to a strip club and have someone dress up like a TSA agent. The rest of us don't want to be molested. Someone, they keep talking about UBI. I don't know if they know that I've done several videos on UBI, so...
I think I don't know. It's outside the scope. We want to keep it
open
borders.
All right, we'll keep it. There's a link to just Google UBI is terrible. I'll post it at Anarchy Ball later if you want. Yeah. UBI is horrible and economically.
You could probably rant.
Yeah, I'm not even going to go there.
In the video,
I'm not even going to go there.
Watch the video.
No, yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, don't tempt me because I could go on about why UBI doesn't work. And by work, you have to define that too. All right, so we don't have a choice. Oh, if government doesn't make you have a choice, yeah. So if we're not doing UBI, I think we've talked about all the debate and the issues.
Yeah, and the discussion between.
So we could do UBI.
You're Larken really accepts that? Well, wait. We might do UBI. Have we addressed everything? Because obviously we went live for the purpose of discussing open and closed borders and discussing the debate between... You were blocked by Jared Howell. That's funny.
Not
but
surprised.
The debate between Chase and Larken. So in terms of that, I don't know. I think we addressed it. We didn't talk too much about the debate, just basically the base premises. So Larken was staying to principles. Both Larken and Chase are ANCAPs, and they want to privatize everything. They only differed, and that's what the whole debate was about, was what to do in the interim. Do we have the state enforce borders and immigration and control immigration, or do we not? And so, I think we talked about it. I don't know. Does anyone have anything about the debate with Chase and Larken?
Anything last of that? Otherwise, it'll be UBIs.
Then you can talk about UBI. But yeah, does anyone want to talk about, once, twice?
Oh, here we go. Chase's logic.
Okay, all right.
By Chase's logic, someone says Mexicans have restitution owed to them by the U.S. government over the drug war. Right, and I'm right there with you, Jimmy. I completely agree. If the whole premise is the U.S. government commits oppression to somebody and destroys or takes something of theirs, then they're owed something. Well, okay, why is that limited to U.S. citizens when all around the world people have been drastically oppressed by the U.S. government, especially, military policy?
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, nobody else. I guess nobody else. We'll just do it as is. If you guys want to talk about it again, just post a comment. We'll
UBI?
You want to talk about UBI?
I want to talk about UBI. All right. So I love doing this. So the UBI part, at least. So yeah, UBI. I'm not going to be on the wrong side of history as far as what actually is taking place as far as UBI is concerned. So UBI, universal basic income, can come from several different sources, right? The idea of universal, basic, and income, each word, universal means for everybody, basic means some basic need, income of course means it's kind of a regular thing as far as money, or whatever value it is goes. And so there are several renditions of this. We have the one that's redistribution. So people talk about this from replacing the welfare system to start and giving everybody money, and that comes out of taxes. There's the one that's based on a type of printing or other type of currency, giving everybody some type of cryptocurrency or something like that. I'm not going to deal too much with that because that's not really the material ones that are out there as far as what people are talking about now in public discourse. Then there's the resource-based one. You're talking about things like in Alaska where they do the payouts for oil to people. They have the natural resource, they sell it, and they give everybody a little bit of money. So fundamentally, universal basic income is a problem from the redistribution standpoint because it's distorting market signals first and foremost. It's taking money from people who have earned it, and it's giving money to people who have not yet done anything to earn it or exchange for it. So it's distorting market signals as to wants. And coupled with the government's regulations and restrictions on entering the market, as far as minimum wage laws go, as far as business laws go, there's an extremely anti-entrepreneurial climate. So what that means is that when people are given this money, there's a very huge disincentive to do anything business-wise because you'll end up in legal hot water. I mean, we're in a world where literally kids who have a lemonade stand get shut down. People are fined for mowing people's lawns without a business license. It's not a joke. It's not just news stories. This is real stuff. When it comes to that level of oppression, it's real. It's serious. And the minimum wage laws, of course, keep people from being able to do things less than minimum wage. As long as Obamacare is still up, very hard to have a business with 5 or more employees. Right. Because of the 5 or more, because of the regulations that come into play. As far as having to provide healthcare and things like that. So all these things put together generally leads to net consumption. So when you have people being given money, redistribution, you have net consumption. That is people who are just consuming it because the risk of doing anything else by meeting other people's subjective values, is just not there. When it comes to doing business stuff like that, it's very risky. So what could you do? You could either go to the store and consume food, go out to eat nice stuff, pay your rent, your bills, blah, blah, blah. or you could try starting a business and meeting subjective values and put yourself out there that, is risky. So by and large, you end up having a net consumption in that realm. And, again, when you're comparing it to welfare is not everybody. It's a limited group of people. Universal basic income goes to everybody. So you've just expanded welfare. Now, when it comes to the nature of the resources, being redistributed like Alaska, again, when we're talking about universal basic income, the amount of money that's needed to live, even by federal poverty standards is huge. And people in Alaska are making, a couple $1,000s. So it's nowhere near, what you would expect in terms of richness. But yes, there is some temporary benefit technically, and I'm not saying ethically, but technically, due to resources being distributed out, or the sales of those things. But they're subject to market competition. So in other words, price fluctuations and being outmoded by other governments or competitors for those resources. So again, when people are saying, universal basic income, is it meeting the ideals of, this is enough to live on and you're all good? No. Most certainly not. And no historical example by any government's experiment ever has shown that. They mostly have ended up running into failures, even Venezuela with Citgo. You could have all the oil-rich resources you want. If your policy is crap, if you are banning people from working, if your private property rights are being disrespected, it's not going to matter. Right. Now, as to technology, I love the technology part too, because a lot of people get lost in this. They think, there's going to be AI, and all of a sudden nobody has jobs. The robots have taken the jobs. Oh my God! Yeah. But if you look historically, in every single instance, as far as jobs go, whenever you have technology that increases efficiency, if it's replacing someone, that means that the technology itself is cheaper than the human. And that means that it's cheaper to produce. So if you have competition, as you have the competition, prices start to fall. And so all it's doing is it's causing prices to get lowered. In other words, artificial intelligence-like things, because it's not true artificial intelligence yet, and other types of automation are just going to be lowering prices. So in other words, you're getting what we have now. Why does everybody have a really nice, cell phone, even if they're poor at federal poverty line? Why is it that someone making $25,000 a year has an iPhone 6 Plus or whatever, and someone who makes $250,000 a year also has an iPhone 6 Plus? Again, it's technology and efficiency and the costs going down that make it accessible to even the poorest, where even homeless people can have T-shirts and cell phones because the government doesn't have a tax on it that you have to pay every year to own a cell phone or own a T-shirt. So that's really what ends up happening. And the only reason people can't do other things or apply themselves in different avenues will be because of the regulations on wages and entry into employment. So in other words, minimum wage laws will prevent people from finding new avenues to do different types of work, from trading in microeconomies, occupational licensing, business regulations and licensing, taxation, laws as to minimum employments, equal pay stuff as that gets worse, and all of a sudden there's all these lawsuits and you're like, oh my gosh, is this woman being, paid enough? That's 99 cents on the dollar. As that keeps on going up, it's going to make it very impossible for people to be able to live. And so you will see this problem. And that's the thing is you will see, oh my gosh, there are robots and automations taking over. Right. Yes. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Because it's driving down the cost.
Right, it's driving down the cost. Right. It's a great thing. It's going to make it very cheap. And also, and just bear in mind, whenever businesses make things, you need to have someone to purchase it. Otherwise, you don't make a profit. You don't pay back the expense and the cost, right? You can't make products and then they just sit there in a warehouse, and you didn't make any money. You have to have people be able to buy them, which is why Henry Ford dropped the prices on the Model T so that people could afford it and that he could actually move them off the production line. That's exactly what happens even with automation, AI, and blah, blah, blah. It's going to happen that same way. The only thing that's going to keep people in poverty is not being able to engage in the market, work below minimum wage, where even that wage or whatever will still be rich because now your computer is now a quarter of the cost. Your cell phone is a quarter of the cost. And things like that. So it's going to be no different than anything we've ever seen in the past as far as technological leaps and bounds. Yes, it will be more dramatic. Yes, it will be mind-blowingly amazing as to what the potential for machine learning and AI can do. But in terms of economics, it doesn't change anything as far as any other radical technology has been in the past 100, 200 years. It's just whether or not people are allowed to do different things, engage in microeconomies, change how they operate using the technology of that time.
But with government regulations, they won't. And what you're
Right.
calling out, what you're saying will happen is if government continues interfering in the market as it's doing, with occupational licensing, minimum wages, and other regulations on starting businesses, you're going to have those distortions in the market, which, just like it always has been done in history, government's just going to blame those problems on the free market. They're just going to say, hey, look at these problems in the free market that were actually caused by government interference. Looks like the government needs to interfere some more. It's just going to be the same cycle. So that's what we need to, produce videos on and discuss, is how the market is actually distorted right now. Why, robots taking over jobs is even a problem in the first place. And also mentioning how it was actually the minimum wage that actually drove up the incentive for companies like McDonald's and Wendy's to have automated self-service order checkout robots. So that's what we need to talk about. So, yeah. And I think one of the things, we need my guy to fix what the other guy broke. This is just an example, and watch out for this whenever you're debating with leftists, when you're debating with, the alt-right, as we did today on closed borders, is watch out for, this, I don't know what to call it, like this pattern. Yeah, pattern, that's the best word I think of, that happens is the government creates a problem. The government creates a problem by interfering in the market, just like they did with healthcare. And then they blame the problems that they create on the free market. They blame it on capitalism and people voluntarily associating. They blame it as just a natural, effect of capitalism. And then it'll sell itself. It'll sell more government intervention as the solution. So watch out for that pattern. And that's something that I've been, checking for, whenever we talk about anything. And oftentimes when it comes to distortions in the market, a refugee crisis, whatever, the welfare state, these are things created by the government. These are problems created by the government. Another thing this applies to is Obamacare and the health debate. Bernie Sanders in his debate with Ted Cruz was like, in response to Ted Cruz saying that Obamacare only served to line the pockets of insurance companies more, because Obamacare was a cronyist policy that actually, because it forced people to have insurance or pay a tax penalty, basically the insurance companies got more customers and thus they actually tripled their profits. Bernie Sanders' response was, well, right, exactly. That's why we got to get insurance companies out of health insurance and replace it with the single payer. It's just like, dude, you're ignoring that government caused the issue in the first place with Obamacare. And even way back to the 1920s when there wasn't a, AMA, American Medical Association. There wasn't an AMA regulating how many college students can go to medical school. There wasn't an AMA regulating how many doctors there would be. There wasn't all these regulations in the market. And there used to be these friendly societies back in the early 1900s where poor, working, middle-class people could afford health care by pooling it together. But that's something that the AMA actually outlawed. So if you look back at any crisis, like anything, the environment, health, anything, just look at what the government has been doing, look at how they interfered, and look at how they actually caused the problem in the first place. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, that pattern, and that happens a lot. And it's really liberating to see through the madness of what the statists try to feed you, and The mainstream media, this is a little off topic, is just a continuation of all the fucking indoctrination we received in public school. So, anyway, I think I started to ramble, but I think it was good.
No, you're good.
But yeah. So, you're looking at the comments for BL?
Yeah, I'm just taking one last look.
I see. Well, how long have we been doing this? Do you guys have any questions? Do you have more things about UBI you want to talk about? Oh, you can see my finger. Yeah, we need more government to fix the government.
Yeah. It's not funny,
yeah. So, alright, well. Is that it?
That's it. That's what I'm talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. Bo's rambling is much better, no
okay.
offense. Do you know why? It's because...
She's way more wasted, that's why.
No! It's because I am in... I said problem. Did I? Oh shit. It came out. My favorite. Anyway. But it's because I'm an ESTJ, which, if you haven't looked at MBTI, I don't know, it's kind of cool, you know? It's another way to learn about yourself, self-knowledge, you know? I don't know, that was a cool accent. But... But yeah, so anyway, it's because I'm an ESTJ, linear logical thinker, and you're an ENTP, so very big picture thinker. So there's a lot of things in your mind that you're synthesizing, whereas I can like focus narrowly and be detail oriented. So that's why. Embrace white Sharia. Taxation stuff. White Sharia is the only way. La ilaha white Sharia. Alright, I'm just going to read comments until people leave. We have 44 people watching. Submit now. So who is Hannah Ball anyway? Oh, it's a lot of people. It's a... What? Oh. Who is Anarchy Ball? It's me, don't you know? It's just a philosopher. Who is this? No, there's lots of admins. W was ESTJ. Who's W? Like George W. Bush? George Washington? W? Like the letter? Oh, you only see Rasta Monkey? There's Savet, you know, you see their, like, they have their signatures. You can look for that. What is the homework, Michael, and on what? George W. Bush. Oh, he's an ESTJ. Oh, that makes sense. He just had like he said the funniest things. It's like he was like, haha, I was put here as president. Like, what am I doing here? Like, are you going to comment that Ancom's criticism of your post is YouTube is Bad Mouse Productions? I don't know which posts. Like my posts or like philosophers' posts? I don't read, I can't, there's too many comments on Anarchy Bulb. Are you talking about philosopher? I haven't heard of Bad Mouse Productions. Yeah, don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. Property rights, self-ownership. That's simple, folks. Well, we're still at 44 people watching, but not many people typing, so I mean, what should I do? Okay, here's a question. If I ordered a shirt, who do I complain to? I ordered it 2 weeks ago.
Send a message to the Anarchy Ball.
Okay, you're on anarchyball.com, right? Yeah, so send a message to the Anarchy Ball page. 8.8 million views and almost 100% likes. What are you talking about? Bo, who are you wearing? Who are you wearing? What do you mean? I'm not wearing anybody. I don't wear people. Why am I Ancom? What do you mean? I'm not an Ancom. Oh, Ancap. Who is Ancap? Race war win. Why am I an Ancap? Well, it's basically on principles. Why is there all these angry likes? Or angry reactions? Anyway, so I'm an ANCAP because I'm an anarchist. I believe that there should be no mandatory rulers. That's what anarchy means. And then I'm a capitalist because I want all transactions to be voluntary, and I think that the capitalist norms for property acquisition are the most efficient way to accumulate property, and they make the most sense. And basically, what I mean by property norms, capitalist property norms, it's the same as the Larken property norms. So either you transform unused land, you homestead unused or abandoned land, and then there's a gray area with abandoned land, or you acquire land through voluntary transaction and trade. And it's, at least from everything I've seen, it's the most respectful of individuals because I'm an individualist. And yeah, so that's why I'm an ANCAP. That's what those red carpet people always ask women. Who are you wearing? Like, who designed your shirt? Oh, I see. It's like a cleanup, so I don't know. Probably like some random person in an office who, works for this company, International Cleanup, and they're like on the team for designers. They're like, oh yeah, I designed this shirt. I have the. Oh, someone asked, this is a good question. What are both of your histories of political sightings? Were either of you leftists before? What or who changed your mind?
You go first.
Me first? Okay. Before that, I would say I always identified like as a boy. No, I'm just kidding. But I identified as a Democrat, but then like I didn't like a lot of their policies. Like I didn't like how it was like, I didn't like the welfare program. So there were some things. So I always said I was independent. And a lot of people in my class were always like, oh, I'm just independent. Like I just pick and choose which policies I like. I advocate for government aggression in this place, but not this place. So I would say I was more Democrat leaning. What about you, Jax?
I grew up in like a conservative Christian household, and I was mainline Republican up until about 19, 20 years old. All about gotta support troops, gotta protect Israel and send all kinds of money over there in order to defend their borders and kill whoever is necessary because it's us versus them mentality. So a lot of that resonates with me, and I have a very deep understanding of what that's like to be in that mindset.
Yeah, right. And I have a lot of understanding of more the leftist emotional argument. And what changed me was I started listening to Stefan Molyneux through my ex-boyfriend who just showed me Stefan Molyneux, and I started watching it. And at first I was like, even I love philosophy now, and I just really value reason evidence because it's helped me so much in my personal relationships and understanding myself and having just a better foundation in life. But at first I was all resistant. I was like, this guy's too logical and he talks for over an hour. But eventually I started listening to his call-in shows where he talked about personal relationships. So that was kind of my exposure to anarcho-capitalism was through Stefan Molyneux, but first mostly interested in his podcast about self-knowledge and his personal conversations with people who would call in, because I was working through my own stuff. So that's how I got exposed to anarcho-capitalism, and I eventually started watching more videos. So then I was like, okay, shit, this makes sense. But at first I was like, but who would protect us if there was no taxation? What about the police? What about the police? Who is going to protect us? That was kind of my thing there. So, but it's been fun, the journey. What about you? What kind of exposed you to anarcho-capitalism?
Oh goodness! I mean, I started my journey, when I was in college, and I was in history class, and we were studying Buck v. Bell, a case about eugenics, and it really struck a chord with me that the United States government had a eugenics program, and it went on through 1979. Over 65,000 people in the United States were forcibly sterilized. So when I found that out, I realized, there's a lot to American history I didn't know, so I had to start doing some research. And over about 3 years, I started to shift more and more. Like many people watching some Alex Jones videos and this or that, back when he was a little bit more on point. But
was he talking about turning the frogs gay?
He wasn't frogs gay level yet. Not yet. He didn't hit that, and interdimensional, child molesting levels. But, there's some good stuff there. And, eventually I came across some good stuff with the No State Project. And there was one quote that kind of stuck with me, and it's, should goods and services be provided at the barrel of a gun? And, reading that made me realize, wow, this is an ethical standpoint. Can I justify any good or service being provided by force? And I realized then, I couldn't.
Wow,
it wouldn't be ethically consistent. So
I've always thought, when you told me that, I thought it was fascinating because it's like one question, one quiz, but
one question that
I feel like most people, maybe not, I can't say most, but some people definitely would look at that and just be like, well, yeah. Like, of course you can. It's necessary, but you, really thought about it, which I find really cool. Mm-hmm. People living off government checks who cannot work. Really cannot work. Your view?
They exist.
Right. Well,
they do exist.
You mean, in terms of assistance? That's right. Probably what you mean.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
Exists.
Yes. Where are these people?
I think one of the main things is a lot of people who say that we need, government force redistribution of wealth. A lot of them grew up without much of a family foundation. They didn't really have people who supported them, parents who were well off themselves, had them, gave birth to them when they themselves didn't have enough resources to take care of them. And it's kind of tragic, So that's one of the things. And how we handle that is it can all be done voluntarily, and actually private charities, not government coerced ones, have actually, they give a lot of money. And there's an incentive in terms of, one of the incentives is just publicity. Like Microsoft has this Give campaign every year where they encourage their employees to donate, and then they distribute that, give it to different charities and stuff like that. And nonprofits and private charities do it much more efficiently because they have more of an incentive to be able to stay afloat. Whereas the government, because they can coerce people into giving up their money, they have much less of an incentive to be careful. It's easy to be generous or blow money that you yourself didn't earn. You know what I mean? So, just think of back when you're a teenager living with your parents. Your parents gave you money. How much less did you care about what you spent that money on versus when you were out of your parents' house and making your own money, and then now that money is scarce and actually take your own, effort and intellect to make. So, yeah. Someone asked, where did you meet?
Where?
On the internet.
Yeah. It was on, it was MySpace.
It was MySpace. We met about 2 years ago. Someone earlier was like, anarchy ball and philosophers sitting in a tree. But this is Jack. This is, anarchy ball is like everyone's daddy. No, I'm just kidding.
He said, nobody's helping my uncle who can't walk. He barely in camp say would survive. He barely does now. Yeah, no, it's tough, and that's a tough thing, right? I mean, if he's on disability or on, early Social Security, it would be easy to say, okay, he's got just barely enough because of the social welfare program. But the question is compared to what? What happened with people, for much of human history, before these types of programs? And if you look at it, by and large, most people were connected with some type of civic, social, religious community where there was support for such people. And if you look at the history of the healthcare system too, as far as private aid or private hospitals, private doctors, and how they were able to help people who had needs, it was a lot easier when government wasn't in the way of that. It was a lot easier for those civic and social institutions to help out when government wasn't getting in the way, taxing, regulating, stopping people from being charitable. Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's lots of interesting ways now that people get helped, in certain situations when it comes to ways to have online giving that was never done before with GoFundMe and other types of charitable things.
Yeah.
But as far as the long-term day-to-day, that's a really hard thing. That's something that does require serious consideration. It's compared to what is right now a government, what happened historically, and things like that. Because it's not always pretty for each person. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes people are homeless for a bit, or there's struggles, or whatever it is. Because not everybody gets to choose their parents and choose if they grow up in an abusive household or with parents who are alcoholics or drug addicts or strung out. Yeah. But the question is, okay, what is being advocated for in terms of government, and what does that end up doing in terms of advancing the other social structures and social safety nets that were created voluntarily? And I think if you look at the evidence, government has pushed out a lot of the more efficient and more empathetic, because it was more one-on-one personalized than, okay, let me call it the VA hospital and deal with that nonsense kind of thing. Right. As far as historical concerns go, it was a much more empathetic and direct way.
Some people have asked me what about my mom or something like that. I don't know the specific person. I don't know what types of relationships they've built or destroyed. I don't know. I don't know that individual personally, but if it were me or if it were my mom and they were going through something. If my mom was disabled, for example, I would do everything I could to, try and raise funds for help. GoFundMe is a really good platform. So I don't know if you've tried that, but, you could say my uncle is disabled, friends and family, please help, etc. He needs this much for this. That's what I would do. It's sad, but at the end of the day, each individual is trying to take care of themselves. And, you kind of pointed this out, but government makes it harder for you to have excess resource to even think about giving it to other people. With Obamacare and all these tax penalties and all these different regulations and government distorting the market and decreasing competition, making it much harder to even acquire wealth. It's hard to be generous when you're just trying to scrape by, so government intervention is definitely not the answer. It's how do we increase wealth? How do we make it easier for people to acquire wealth? And it depends on how he's disabled too. If there were jobs that you could do despite not being able to walk, if that's a disability, there's different things like that, so. Cool. Someone said, I don't want government, but I'm also torn. Not really sure people are very giving. In my opinion, I don't see people caring about strangers who are disabled. I'm his only family member. I see. I work 21 days a month. Offshore, all my spare times goes to my daughter. Wow, I see. Yeah, so you're trying to support a lot. You're trying to support yourself. You're his only family member. I mean, I don't know what friends he's made during his lifetime either. It's hard. It's tough. There's going to be tragedies, and there's going to be tragedies in anarcho-capitalism. Anarcho-capitalism and voluntarism is just how do we maximize consent and minimize the initiation of force. So how do we do that? And with the state or not, you're going to have, individual cases where, they grew up, they had certain families who were dysfunctional, etc. That's not what anarcho-capitalism is trying to control for every individual. It's just trying to set up the mechanisms for the most opportunity. And you just compare that to what is with the state now, with the state already distorting things and causing harms. It only get better. The more you decrease the initiation of violence, the better things would get. So it's definitely not a utopia. It's definitely not, about being like a control freak like the state is, trying to control for every single possible thing that could go wrong. It's not about that. It's just, how do we set up a solid foundation for there to be prosperity and peace? So.
Right. And obviously, as you have more prosperity and more peace, what, seems like an impossible task before becomes very probable in the future in terms of wealth. Yeah. And that, and that's really what it boils down to, is when you have the standard of living so high that a poor person's excess is like crazy abundance compared to what anybody else in history has felt. You know what I mean? It really is. It's one of those things you have to be reflective about and say, how do you live on the average, for the average person compared to how someone lived on the average 100 years ago kind of thing, or 200 years ago. And when you think about that level of growth, we're talking about something that's going to be exponentially even better than that.
Yeah.
The more freedom there is, as the dial or knob, knob combine it, freedom goes up.
Yeah.
You trend toward that, prosperity, which is why America had so much prosperity. It was because, it started generally small, and that steamrolled, if you could say snowballed, into a very prosperous overall nation. But of course, that ball has been slowing down and withering away because of the government's interventions. There was so much wealth created from the first industrial revolution.
Yeah.
I mean, an insane amount when you think about the resources, and to a large extent, much of that is still being expended. The wealth that was created from that industrial revolution,
and how much has slowed down with government propaganda saying, oh my god, look at these dirty capitalists, we gotta regulate meat industry, we gotta regulate everything or else everyone's gonna die, and just rolling everything back. It's just really tragic. So yeah, but if you just look at just look at your average homeless person, I don't know, like Washington State, for example, that's where I come from. I just look at, I was driving along the roads, and under the highways there's a bunch of tents, and that's where all the homeless people are. There's a bunch of tents. They have these portable fire pits where they can cook. They have water jugs, stuff like that. So there's hygiene. You could not have that, way back then, before the Industrial Revolution. The living standards are much higher now, to where you could survive. And actually a lot of, it's really weird, but a lot of white leftist liberals choose to be homeless. They choose to walk around Seattle, go to rave clubs all the time. I see there's this culture, in this hippie culture in Seattle where that happens, and they're able to afford it. You don't, a lot of people choose to actually go the homeless route because you can afford to be sustained and stuff like that. Without having to be in a home, and you can buy all the stuff at the store that you need, like shelter and stuff. So it's kind of interesting. Oh, someone said, "Pho, in your song, it does indeed sound like you said, I'd rather see your feces." I know. It's just I know.
She said, yeah, feces.
Yeah, feces.
Theses.
I know, feces.
Like me, with a TH.
Yeah. It's true. What do you think of the situation of Austria when Mises was an economic advisor back in the 30s during the Great Depression? I've heard Keynesian advocates tell me that it's proof that government is needed in the economy. I actually don't know of that situation. I don't have the historical knowledge. So, do you know anything about it? I haven't.
I'm not exactly sure what about that.
Yeah,
I'd have to re-look into it because I'm not gonna. I don't want to speak on it out of ignorance and misspeak about something. So I'm not sure what you mean by what do you think of the situation? Because that was when they were very militaristic and nationalistic.
I see.
Yeah, and that was when they were building up.
My back hurts.
So,
Well,
oh, I guess it's time to wrap it up.
yeah. So, this has been fun, guys. This is like my favorite live stream ever. So, yeah.
Some real.
Thank you for the people. There's like been a solid 30 or so people watching, and hopefully it was entertaining for you guys. I don't know if you drank with us, if that helped you stay and, entertained. Thanks so much, guys. I hope you all have a great Saturday and a great Sunday and weekend. Bye. Take care.